This webinar is being recorded. Doug Boucher.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be able to kick off the Reston Sprint Triathlon, our first ever global webinar. And we're also, I want to say, first of all, congratulations to those on the phone that have registered. We always sell out fast, and really the race is effectively, there's still a couple slots left. I think this morning it was less than 40. Still a few slots left, but congratulations for being able to get into the Reston Sprint Triathlon. This is our 14th year, and it's 14 years of bringing the sport of triathlon to the community. And I want to congratulate you, too, not just on be able to register for the Sprint Triathlon, but for making the commitment to either try the sport of tri, if it's your first time, or to continue to develop yourself as you go through the world of multi-sport. If it is your first triathlon, you've got a lot of company. Almost 20% or 200 athletes every year choose our triathlon to do their first triathlon. So ever since our inception, we've had a commitment to helping our athletes get better, whether they're brand new or, again, they just want to develop their skills. So in addition to today's webinar and the series of webinars that Sharon's going to present, we have meetups, newsletters, emails that will help you on your journey to make sure that come May 31st, that you'll be able to give it your best. I will say that that we're very fortunate to have Sharon Adams presenting this series. I can't tell you how excited. She's a longtime friend, but she is an expert in her field. She not only as an athlete, but as a coach. And I'm going to turn it over here to her in a moment. But if you're watching this conversation live, the whole purpose of this is to give you an opportunity to interact and engage as you're hearing about the message. So if you see where the chat box is there, that's the place to submit your question. Everyone's on mute, so we're using the chat box just so there's not any other distractions. To ask your questions, and we'll respond. If for some reason there's a question that can't be answered during this call, we promise that we'll send a message out answering that question. If you are listening to this recording, please don't hesitate to submit your questions to us using our Facebook site or responding to an email. Again, the purpose of this is to bring you into the sport of triathlon and to help you on your journey. So again, my name is Doug Boucher. By the way, I should have said that first. My name is Doug Boucher. And it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce you to your presenter today, Sharon Adams. Sharon, it's all you.
Thanks, Doug. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Like Doug said, it's super exciting that you've signed up for the race. And for that, just like Doug had mentioned, I give you a huge congratulations. So sometimes that's the hardest step is, especially if it's your first time registering and doing a triathlon, the hardest thing is just to say, I'm going to do it. And even if you're a returning triathlete, committing to races is really, like, I always think of it as a way to guarantee on race day, you are going to be more fit than you would be if you weren't doing the race. So welcome, thanks for being here. I hope I can share some really great information. Just going through a few slides is just kind of a general introduction, and then each week we'll go through the specific sports. Next week will be swim, the week after bike, and the week after run, just to give you some information on training for those races. So hopefully you get some good motivation and information to get started. So we can go ahead to the next slide here. So we're going to start off talking just a little bit about goals. So race goals, basically one of the things I always try to, really highlight to the athletes that I coach is that the first thing to do is figure out overall what is your race goal. If you don't know your race goal, then you won't know how to train for that race. So in order to set the best training goals, you need to match them up with your race goals. So for beginner racers, that might mean that your race goal is to do the race, is to finish the swim, the bike, and the run. And that's a great goal. Along with that, what I do always suggest to any triathlete is to break it down just a little bit further as well. Have a swim goal. So that way the whole race is broken up into smaller, more manageable chunks. Your swim goal might be, as a beginner racer, just to get through the swim without stopping. It might be to swim the whole thing freestyle. If you are a returning triathlete and you're comfortable with the swim, your goal might be to have the fastest swim time that you've ever had. Likewise, break down the race into what your bike goal is. So you might have a time goal, you might have a goal that you want to feel strong, stay calm, race smart. Your run goal, you might again have a specific goal of averaging a certain pace per mile for your run. It might just be, if you are a first-time triathlete, it might be to get through the run, running the whole thing with no walking. So really, I urge you to really think about race goals. What are you really looking for to get for yourself, your personal race? What are you looking to get out of this race for you? The common thing that I'm sure everybody has heard, you won't get there unless you know where there is. So really be as very specific as you can on setting those goals up. And one more thing about goals is I always recommend coming up with different levels of goals. So there's swim, bike, and run goals, but you also might want to have a big A goal. So for this race, my big pie in the sky, my dream goal for, I feel like the best, this is going to keep me motivated through the winter training. This is my top goal. That's your A goal. But then again, to have, okay, it might be raining that day. You might not get that A goal on the bike. So what's a B goal? If it's raining, you might have to slow down and just be a little bit more careful around the corners so your time might not be as fast. What's a B goal for you? So to really think about setting up some different levels of challenges for yourself that you can keep motivated for training, but also really make sure you find success within each of the segments of the race. So we can go ahead on to the next slide here. We're going to talk a little bit about training time. Everybody has a limited amount of training, limited amount of time to train, and now you're breaking up your fitness into swim time, bike time, run time, and adding even on top of that, strength training time, yoga time, recovery time. So the number one thing to do in setting up your weekly training schedule is to make an honest look at your life, your schedule, and your time, and say, this is what I can do, and this is what I cannot do. But really to be honest with yourself and find, okay, maybe for an example might be, somebody might come up and say, okay, I have 2 days during the work week, I can do a 45-minute training session. Other days, my schedule's tighter, it's just gonna be 30 minutes, and I can't do any weekend training because I've got whatever it is that's going on. That might be somebody's reality. Okay, that's your reality, set it, train within that. Another example, maybe somebody might say, okay, I don't wanna do anything on Friday. I want that to be my day off, but I can do both weekend days, I can do 90 minutes each weekend of exercise, training, and Monday through Thursday, I have a full hour each of those days. Okay, so that is specific. You can work with either in anything that you do have, as long as you dedicate yourself to those times that you know are available for your training. So really, sometimes it's just being honest and saying, okay, when is that hour going to be? Is it going to be 5 to 6 a.m.? Is it going to be 5 to 6 p.m., 7 to 8 p.m.? On Mondays, when can you train? And really writing that down, committing to it, that is your time. So I urge you after this webinar to really take even a couple minutes and just on a piece of paper, sketch down your schedule, find your blocks of time, commit to them. And moving on to our next slide. So breaking down our training time, there's always kind of that individuality. So if you could take your training time and you still everybody wouldn't train the same way. Otherwise, everybody would have the same training plan. But every person has their own strengths, history, weaknesses, history of swim experience, bike experience, run experience. So you do want to look into kind of your individual past. For swimming, if you're a new swimmer, you're going to have to dedicate a little bit more of your training time each week to swimming, just to get yourself used to the pool, get your body used to continuous swimming, trying to make it through the 400 meters of the swim for the race. So that might, at the very beginning, require more of your training time. if you grew up as a swimmer and you know that that is something that you're good with, and your big thing is you're new to the bike, that might change things for you. So you might need to work a little bit more on biking, getting comfortable, spending time on the bike, covering the distance. So for new swimmers, for example, what I definitely recommend if you are new is to commit to getting to the pool 2 times a week. This might take up more time because you have to get there. It's not something you can just do from your front door, for most of us at least. So you have to get to the pool, you got to find time, you got to find the schedule and get into the pool. But 2 times a week, hitting the water, getting your body used to getting a feel for the water, I highly recommend that over going only once a week. Obviously, if you have more time available, a pool, if you are a member of the Y, or you can go to certain places to get your swim training, and you might even do more than that. But if you are new, I would recommend beginning to try to get 2 times a week minimum at the pool. Cycling, this is a huge opportunity to decrease your overall race time. So there's big gains to be made if you can spend a little bit more time training on the bike. Minimum, I would again say 1 to 2 times per week, which is very doable. And again, you take your overall available time and really just figure out, okay, what are my goals? How can I plug these sports into my available training time? Moving down to running, basically one thing just to kind of keep in mind is high intensity run workouts have the greatest training transfer effect to cycling. So if you have a week where you're traveling for work and you can really only if you have to choose between biking or running for one of your workouts, I always advise doing a higher intensity run workout, because studies have shown that fitness gain from those high intensity workouts will transfer over to biking the most. So kind of keep that in mind. But then again, if you are new to running and you're just beginning and you want to make sure you can run the 5K without walking, then that might be something that definitely you need to spend a little bit more time per weekend. Again, minimum, I would recommend 1 to 2 times per week. Really 2 times per week for the idea of injury prevention. If you're only running once a week, you will be more likely to get injured over being a little bit more consistent with hitting the ground, getting your running dynamics a little bit smoother by running at least twice a week. So that's just a general breakdown, and we'll move it down to the next slide to talk a little bit more about swimming. So for swim, here's some questions that I just wanted to bring up. And basically these are things after the webinar. Go through this and really look through and figure out the answers to these questions for yourself so you know what your next step is. Questions, where will you swim? If you're not used to swimming right now, where's your place? Find your place this week. Check when lane availability is. If they have high school swimmers right now, that's a little bit limiting your schedule. Find something that works within your schedule. Equipment. Do you have the equipment that you need to train? Basically, the bare bones of what you need, cap and goggles, okay? Everybody is always trying to find the best goggles that work for your specific shape of your face. Some women like to use like child's goggles because they'll be a little bit more narrow. So there's a lot of play back and forth between goggles. So start now to make sure you have a pair of goggles that works for you. If it doesn't work, that gives you time to change that. Fins, those basically, if you are going to be using a fin, there's 2 types. There's the long type that a lot of times people will use for like snorkeling. Those are not recommended to use for kick practice. You want to use something that's called Zoomers. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask a little bit more. I can send links and resources over where to get those. They're shorter and it keeps a little bit safer for your ankles. And less risk of injury. Pull buoy, this is a great tool especially if you are beginning to learn how to swim, because it helps hold your body up. We'll talk a lot more next week for the swim specific, but these are just some ideas of what you can use to make your swim training fun and interesting. Snorkels, some people use these to train just so they don't have to keep worrying about turning and breathing, so they can just work on the dynamics of the catch of the water, the pull, the recovery of the arm. So keep that in mind. These are not things that you need, but that's a helpful tool, and it makes it fun to break up some of your distance in the pool. Kickboard, if you have your own kickboard to bring to the pool, great. A lot of times pools that you train at will have ones that you can borrow. Just a nice ability to add in a kick set to work a little bit on that aspect. A lot of times triathletes have notorious heavy legs that sink in the pool, so kicking is a big part of it. We'll talk a little bit more about this specific stroke mechanics next week. So be prepared, and I hope to share some good information about that next week. And we can move on to the next slide for biking. So biking, questions for this to ask yourself. What is your cycling experience? Are you used to biking on the roads? Have you only used a stationary bike inside of a gym before? What are your race goals for the bike? So again, this is going to determine how much of your training time should be dedicated to cycling. Are you comfortable on your bike? Are you comfortable? Is the bike set up for you? Now is a great time of year to take your bike to a place that's a local place, the bike lane, and have them look at your setup. Have them show you, if you don't know how to change a flat. This is a great time of year to learn that when we can't be outside as much due to colder weather. Another question, do you have to ask yourself, do you have a bike trainer to set your bike up? This helps you just have your bike all the time, ready to go, ready to rumble indoors, so you can just hop on your bike. You don't have to worry about ice. You don't have to worry about traffic. And that way your whole training time is dedicated to continuous biking. And we'll go over ideas for trainer workouts next week and some more information about that, but just questions to ask yourself and, you know, ideas to really start looking into. Also, now is the time for bike maintenance. Do not wait until race week to have your bike checked. So that's when it's busy. That's when kids' bikes come in. The bike shops are busy then. So now is the time to make sure your bike is functioning really well for you and safely for you to train on. Equipment that you need, for sure, helmet. You need a helmet. Don't bike without a helmet. Don't even bike down your street without a helmet. Sunglasses, clear glasses. If it's a rainy day, yes, you want clear glasses. I never bike without glasses. It kills my eyes to have just air stuff flying into my eyes. You can wear, depending on your bike, you can wear sneakers on the bike if that's how your bike is set up. If you have pedals to clip in cycle shoes, then that's something that you need as well. And an option that's really helpful to train with also is a bike computer. So that's just, it can be a simple $20, $25 thing that you set up that tells you your average speed, your distance. So you know, I biked 8 miles, I biked 12 miles, the distance of the race. So that way you know what you're doing. You won't be able to improve unless you know where you are. So let's move on to the next slide for running. A lot of people are a little bit more familiar with the run aspect of the race, but some people are new to the running as well. So keep that in mind. Are you used to doing 5Ks? Do you have experience? One of the most important things, and this is for everything, swim, bike, and run, keep track of your training. Running, keep track of your weekly mileage. You don't want to be going from not running at all to running 12 miles every week. You want to gradually up your mileage. So that another reason to keep track is if you upped your miles each week and you start to notice something kind of feeling wonky a little bit with your knee, well, you can look back at your history and see, okay, yeah, I did really jump up that week. Maybe it was too much. Or I ran a lot of hills last week. Maybe that bothered my knees a little bit. Equipment for running is a lot simpler than cycling. So that's the nice thing. Have a good pair of running shoes though. Even though it's simpler, you want to have shoes that are dedicated just to running. So not, mowing the grass, walking the dog shoes. Ask yourself, do you have access to a treadmill? There will be weeks it's too icy. You don't want to risk injury on running on ice. So keep in mind, what you have available to you. Do you have a GPS where you can see, okay, I just went out and I ran 2.5 miles. I know how far I went. Do you have cold weather gear? And if you have questions about any of this, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help and share ideas of what has worked well for myself as well as the athletes that I coach. So let's move on to the next slide. And so we can move on to the next slide. I think there's another one. So yeah, this is the last part. Basically, here we go. We're beginning. So you've signed up. It's the hugest step that you can take. Like it says in this picture, every accomplishment begins with a decision to try. So just by saying that you're going to go for it, you're going to put yourself out there to be vulnerable, to find out what's inside of you, what you can create with your potential. That is a huge thing. It says a lot about your character. But also begin, really take time. If it's tonight, it's sometime, if you have 5 minutes, just sit down and think, what is my training time? What do I have available? What am I willing to commit to? That sends you in the right direction for your goals, your training goals to match up to your race goals. So congratulations again for signing up. Hopefully this gave you some ideas of really just how to get a general introduction to beginning your triathlon training for the year, for the season, or if it's your first ever. And that's all I have for tonight. If you have questions, I don't see a place, maybe I'm missing it. I don't see a place that has questions, but if you do, they will be answered in an email if I don't get them on my screen here. And thanks for coming, and I hope to have you join in again next week for swim training.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I haven't seen any questions come through. Doug, have you? If you do have questions, you want to email us at info@RestonSprintTriathlon.com. .org. And we want to thank Sharon very much for doing this series for us with the replay and the deck and lots of more information to make your training go great. Thank you so much, everyone. And good night. Good night, Sharon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.